Hello and welcome to Bold Women Lawyers Spotlight interview. I am excited today. We have Allison Wang with us. And Allison is a professor and director of externship at Golden Gate University School of Law. And the reason she's with us today is that I've had opportunities to speak to Allison and learn about the work she's doing and how law students are now being prepared for practice once they get out of law school. As I was telling Allison, when I was in law school, it was a while ago, but my preparation for actual practice was I chose as an elective to take a trial advocacy course. And so I got taped, videotaped back then, doing different parts of a trial and then critiqued and sometimes thrown under the bus by local judges, but that was okay. It was good practice, but that was as far as it went. And I think we maybe had one clinic that a handful of students worked at, which with the local legal aid, but that was it. I know there's a lot more going on now. So Allison, welcome. And first of all, before we get into the work that you're doing, just tell us a little bit about, your journey to where you are now and what interested you in doing the type of work you're doing now with students.
Well, thank you for having me. This is really wonderful. And yes, one of the things that really resonated with me when we first spoke was how your law school experience was very similar to mine and the experience of so many other people who I talked to. You're expected to really get this organically when you went to law school. And when you were just talking and you were talking about your trial prep class, I still have the VHS from my intensive trial advocacy class. And luckily we don't have any DVD players anymore. Yes. So hopefully that will safely stay in the past. But I think that that's something that so many of us graduated from law school with, is this sense that we had to figure this out on our own, or that this was knowledge that we should have organically figured out, that everyone just knows this, or, that it would come to us by osmosis, and it didn't. And for so many of us, we spent years figuring these things out, figuring out that we weren't alone, and the feelings that we had and the struggles that we had were the same as everyone else's. And so for me, to get the opportunity to share my life full of knowledge and to work with students and demystify this process and help them learn the tools that they need, because this is the part that for me is so exciting about this, is that there are tools that you can learn how to use, that once you learn how to use them, you can apply them to your career and your career development throughout your time in practice. And you can really just kickstart your professional development. And so to have the ability to share that information and break it down for people in ways that it's usable, and to also, work with law students in the area of, those skills that you need with, I know that soft, we call them soft skills, but I really think that they are much stronger than soft skills. I think they are really the skills that underpin your success as a practitioner. And to work on your confidence, your skills, both your practical skills and these other soft skills that you need. It's really just an incredible opportunity for me and something that I love to do.
So let's talk about that. You've mentioned soft skills, and you and I have spoken about that. Tell us in a little more detail, though, what are you talking about, and why is that so important for these students to learn at this stage?
Those soft skills are all the skills that we think about: communication skills, listening skills, interviewing skills, confidence, your ability to see the world through the eyes of others, negotiation skills, things that, maybe we could put them in sort of like in, I would say, an overall umbrella of communication skills. And why are they so important? Because these are basically, this is the framework for you to be able to share your knowledge and your expertise. And it is the way that you are able to interact with others, to build relationships, and to continue to grow in your confidence and in your career.
And it's interesting you raise or include confidence in that list. And I'll tell you why. I have now been asked, and in a few days, several times I've been asked to do this and have given this talk. And I'm giving it again in a few days to the local Women's Bar Association or the State Bar Association about imposter syndrome and how you practice with confidence. And it struck me, as I prepared for it, this question struck me. Why are we doing this to ourselves? And yet we are, as lawyers, certainly as women lawyers, but I think I've heard from men, they feel the same way, this total lack of confidence. So can you talk a little bit about what some of the things are that you do with your students to help them build up their confidence?
I can. And, so what's so interesting for me is that it does cross, gender lines. It crosses a lot of lines. Is students come into law school and they don't feel confident. They don't feel confident in their skills and their abilities, but they don't have the guidance and the support to reach out to other people and be vulnerable about these fears. So what happens is we're all in these, little boxes of fear on our own, thinking that we're the only ones who feel this way. So for instance, I teach a seminar every semester, and I work with about, 200-300 students a year. And at the beginning of the year, what I do is I teach them how to set professional development goals. But through that process, I teach them about something called fear setting, which is a way to look at goal setting. Are you familiar with fear setting?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So,
yes.
I have them do fear setting exercises because for many of them, it's the first time that they really think about things this way. And one of the things that I find is just a common experience throughout all of your years of law school and in practice is that we don't really think about what fear means and what fear teaches us, right? Fear, anxiety, all these imagined consequences of this thing that we fear, but we never really sit down and unpack it. We never really sit down and think about it. And it turns out that the best antidote to fear is having a solid plan. And how do you make that solid plan? You sit down and you unpack the fears that you have. You think them through. You think about the impact that these fears realistically are going to have on your life. So if you fear, for instance, making a mistake at your internship, that's your biggest fear. You don't want to go into an internship with a judge because you are afraid that you're going to show up and make mistakes. And if you don't do any more thinking around that and you kind of get that mindset, well, I feel the fear and I'm going to do it anyway, but you don't have any introspection around that, all you're going to feel is that continued anxiety, not feeling good enough, not feeling like you belong, not feeling like you can do the work, feeling like something's missing. But if you take that time and you think, well, I feel this fear, but what does that really mean? What will happen if these fears come to life? What happens if I make a mistake in the first week? Is this going to be a life-changing mistake, or is it going to be a minor mistake? And then you can balance that against what am I going to gain from having this experience? What will come out of that week, whether I make a mistake or not? What are the things that will happen if I put myself out there and try? And then when you realize on balance that your fears are probably a little bit smaller than the gain that you're going to get, and also that you've now really thought through what's going to happen, it builds your confidence and it makes you able to go forward. So that is, the first thing that I do. And I find that, students may have some familiarity with goal setting or some familiarity with fear setting, but they haven't really thought about how they can use that as a tool to get the most out of an experience, how they can use it as a diagnostic tool, and how they can use it to build their confidence. Because once you start in my program with your professional development planning, you get tools to diagnose how things are going all the way through. And so at the end, students are really surprised by what they take away and the confidence that they have. Because another thing, and I'm sure that you talk about this when you talk about imposter syndrome, is one of the greatest ways to combat imposter syndrome is through evidence-based thinking.
Exactly. Exactly.
So if you have spent a semester in my class where you have first set some goals for yourself, you've talked about all the things that could go wrong and what you fear, and in an environment where you feel comfortable doing that. And then you have gone through the semester working on your goals in measurable ways so that you can see what you have actually learned and the challenges that you have faced. At the end of that semester, or the time that you spend doing this, if you do it out in the wild, you have an incredible body of evidence about yourself and your skills and your abilities. And that can't be taken away from you. And it's something that really can be used to build that evidentiary foundation to combat more of those imposter-like fears that you may have when you go into a similar situation.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm always surprised at how easy it can be if you're not intentional about looking for the evidence and, write down the evidence, put it, in words, how easy it is to slip into the idea of everything I do is awful. It's all wrong. And I've made so many mistakes. Whoa, 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 whoa. We've all made mistakes, but there's plenty of really positive evidence of the skills that you have. But you brought up the mistake, and I'm glad you did, because even with practicing lawyers and lawyers who have been in practice for a long time, there's this underlying feeling that we have to be perfect all the time. And what I've said is, look, when you're filing that appellate brief, yeah, it's got to be perfect. That's why you go over it a gazillion times and have other people help you and proof it, et cetera. And when you're drafting that contract, yes, it's got to be right. And, those types of documents. There's plenty that we do that does have to be right. But there's plenty that we do that doesn't have to be, that mistakes are okay. And in fact, you actually learn from them. So how do your students, you talked about the fear of making the mistake, and they go through this program with you. When they come out on the other side, do you have a sense of how quickly they can incorporate those tools to understand that, yeah, I'll make mistakes and I can live with that?
Yeah, I think that the vast majority of them have, come out of a practical experience like an externship with a much better sense of what it means to make a mistake. For instance, I have 30 students in my seminar, just in my class this semester. And as part of the fear setting exercise and part of our, initial discussions, what came out is that I would say 95% of them identified as their biggest fear, making a mistake.
Wow.
So it's not, it's really in the forefront when you come in, if it's your first experience or your first legal experience or your first experience that is at a higher responsibility level in the legal realm. It is really just like that front and foremost feeling. And so part of it is they also express that they think that the expectation of them as an intern, an extern, is to be perfect as soon as they walk in, that they're being hired to know how to do whatever it is they have been hired to do right out of the bat, and or right out of the gate. And I always tell them, well, if that was the case, you wouldn't need an externship, would you? You could just go get a job because you can already do this stuff. Why are you here?
Right. Yeah.
But a lot of it is also just demystifying the expectation of their supervisors. And so part of what I do in the class is a couple panels where we talk about this. And one of the things that I feel is always a big turning point for them is when they hear from some of the attorneys who show up who are holding, incredible positions of authority and have years of experience. And they say, yeah, well, I made a mistake last week. Or, when I see you show up for the first time, I expect you to make a lot of mistakes. It's not the mistakes that you make that we're concerned about. It's how you handle them. And that goes back again to all of those skills that we talked about. Is if you make a mistake and you don't know what to do, and you just, kind of shrivel up and you don't know how to work your way through that, that is going to be a very scary experience for you. But if you understand what the expectations are of you and that your supervisor is there to solve problems and that you can communicate with them and that likely it's not going to be as bad as you thought, things you have this opportunity to really learn and grow. And so that's what I think at the end of the semester is that everyone has probably made at least, 4 mistakes.
Right.
And still standing. They are getting excellent reviews from their supervisors. They are leaving with tons of confidence about their abilities. And it really makes a difference. But I think like the thing that really is the deciding factor for whether making mistakes builds your confidence or whether it's just this thing that we don't talk about is, are you able to be vulnerable and authentic with people and share what was scary for you, what was hard for you? Because you will find out that everyone from, the newest intern on their first day to somebody who's been practicing for 20 years at the top of their game, we all still have those fears.
Exactly. And as you spoke, one of the things that struck me was what a lesson what you said is for leadership and lawyers in leadership positions in their firms or who own their firm in dealing with their team members, whether they be lawyers or paralegals or assistants, whoever they might be. Because if you set the tone that, mistakes are terrible and you react very negatively to the mistakes, that just pushes somebody further and further away if they make a mistake, as opposed to, oh, okay, let's figure out what the next step's going to be. We can handle this. Let's work this out, figure it out together. And then, I would always say then once we figured it out, because everybody made mistakes, including me, okay, what lesson have we learned? What can we put in place to prevent this from happening in the future so we don't have to go through this again because now we've learned. And that I found, because there was a point in my career, I'll be honest, where I was like, you did what? Are you kidding? And I would like fly off the handle because I felt like I was under so much pressure and I passed that on, and that wasn't right at all. And so if as a leader, you can learn that, no, I need to back off of that and help myself and whoever I'm talking to work through it, that just, not only on a personal level, but on a business level, puts you so much farther ahead. And your team member is all in because they know that the next mistake that comes up, well, I can go and tell her what happened and we're going to figure it out. So those are great skills you're teaching. You're teaching your students.
Thank you. I actually have a story about, about that sort of situation where as a leader, when you are so focused on the end result that you're not really thinking about the effect on your team, is I once worked for an incredible partner who I love to this day, but who was very scary to work for because when you went in and got an assignment from them, you weren't allowed to come back and ask questions. If you did, they would get upset because in their mind, they thought you hadn't listened well, or they were frustrated because they felt that they had to repeat something. Why wasn't this gotten the first time? That was the expectation. And I got my first assignment and I realized I had to go back for clarification. And I was like, oh, this is going to be bad. And I went in and sure enough, they were upset. And so I said, well, okay, I hear you, but I want to ask you a question. And they said, well, sure, what's your question? They're really annoyed with me. And I said,
Right.
do you want this project to be done right because it will reflect well on you and make your life easier? And they were like, yes. Like, why are you even asking that?
Of course.
And I said, might I just suggest that when people come back and ask you questions, it's not a sign of disrespect or lack of ability, but our great respect for you and our interest in working with you to make this the best product possible and save you the most time possible. And they just kind of were like, I hadn't thought about it like that. And it was the start of a beautiful friendship. But I find that sometimes we just, like you were saying, you get locked into that mode of thinking and you don't always have, you're just in it all the time. So you don't have the time to reflect on what's going on.
Exactly. And yet, that just struck me what you said. That is the perfect response because, yes, of course, I gave you this assignment to make my life easier, to move this case or to get this project, whatever it is. And I think all too often people, don't stop and think, oh, well, if I answer your questions, that's going to make my life a lot easier. Yeah. Wow. That's a great perspective on it. Now, I'm going to veer off a little bit, Allison, because I know you and I have talked about this also. Some of the things that you work with your students on involve professional development and business development. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that, honestly, I don't think those words were ever spoken in the 3 years I was in law school. I don't think I ever heard those words put together. So tell me what you're doing in that regard.
I am extremely passionate about this area. You're right. This is something that we also were expected to just sort of understand organically. And so what we are teaching our new lawyers now is the importance of building relationships intentionally and authentically, both online and in person, and being able to really understand the purpose of networking.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when we hear networking, the first thing we do is just kind of clam up and, but I think one of the most important things for law students and new lawyers to think about is that networking is really not a transactional thing. And I think that's what we thought it was back in the old law school days.
Back in the day, yes.
It's relationship building. And so a lot of the jobs, a lot of the opportunities, and a lot of the rewarding professional development that you get comes from building these great relationships across different aspects, different areas, online, in person, being able to present yourself, through digital marketing or, having your sort of profile, your brand, if you will, just the way that you present yourself, really aligned with who you are authentically so that people can at a glance see who you are and what you do, why you do the things you do, which makes it a lot easier to introduce yourself. So overall, what we do is we teach students how to network in an intentional way. We give them, and so, networking in and of itself, not particularly hard, but having a plan, understanding what all the pieces of networking are, what your mindset should be, how you show up to do this. Should you be consistent? Should you be intermittent? What should you do? All of that is what we teach. So when you leave the class, you have a plan. You understand what it means to be an effective networker, and you have the tools to do that in different situations. You have the tools to present yourself in the way that you need to present yourself across different media. And I think that that is really invaluable for students because you don't get that information anywhere else.
You don't. And I can't tell you how many times I talk to lawyers who are solo and small firm lawyers who like throw up their hands. I hate networking. I don't want to do it. And because they do think of it as completely transactional. And in
Right.
fact, it's not. And in my experience, it has been easier because I had all those negative reactions about it too at one point. It's easier when I can take the lead. And once I learn a little bit about someone and who they are and what they do, and when I see opportunities that could help them business wise, make the introduction
That's
to
wonderful.
someone. Yeah. And that just comes back to you 10 times over when you do that. And that part's not hard to do because you just feel like you're giving, because you are. And when you give, you ultimately get back. But I think too many times people go into it thinking, I'm going to go to this meeting, I'm going to meet, 50 people, and I'm going to get 3 new clients or 5 new clients, or like, whoa, yeah, no, it doesn't. It's just like dating. It doesn't work that way. You don't like go out on one date and get married. It's normally. It's a skill that you need to learn and practice.
Yeah, and I mean, you can have an objective. You can certainly go to an event with the objective to meet a certain number of people or to hopefully develop something. But I think just learning that the mindset behind that isn't that transactional mindset, and that it's an open mindset and a curious mindset, that really changes the game for a lot of people. And then it also ties back to the whole confidence issue.
Yeah.
Law students don't think, I have a ton to offer. I'm going to show up and I have value to add. And they don't realize that they have a ton of value to add. One, attorneys love to talk about themselves. So just in the sense of giving them a forum to talk, to be heard, to share their experience, that is actually giving value, letting someone feel like they are, sharing important information. Two, the untapped potential and the limitless enthusiasm of law students really fires people up. I have talked to so many mentors who are saying, like, I was just feeling kind of blah about what I was doing, the direction I was going in. And, you sent me several law students and I talked to them and I realized I am interested in this, or they helped me think of new ways to be interested in something that just seemed like the same old to me. So, law students, I don't think should discount that value that they bring to the conversation. And, and that's just the base level. Some of them do have other skills. They come from other areas, practice before they were lawyers. There's so much that they may have to offer in, business knowledge, connections. And so going into it with that kind of mindset that you have value to give, that you are confident that, you're going to be a valued part of that conversation. I think that takes a lot of the fear out of that interaction. The other thing is that, let's say you go into it and you think, I want an internship out of this.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay to go into it like that. But if you only listen for yes or no, can I have that internship, then you're going to miss out on the wealth of the interaction. And so, for instance, I will occasionally cold call and share my experiences just so that students can see what really happens when you have these kind of interactions. And the last round of cold calls that I did, I talked to 22 people. I got turned down every single time, but I talked to 2 decision makers out of those 22 people. And both of them turned me down for the specific ask I had, which is, do you have a summer externship for my students? But one of them said, how about fall? And the other one said, how about spring? And then proceeded to tell me about their life experience. And they were incredible. And I can't wait to have them come and speak to my students. So, I never would have had that wealth of experience, made those connections, if I had just had that transactional mindset.
Exactly. And I've certainly had the exact same experience. And that when you're just so focused on one objective that you do miss everything else that's going on around you. And what you find is when you just get into conversation with people, and you said lawyers love to talk about themselves, and we do. I think other people, lots of people do, but we do. And yet when you allow that conversation to happen, you may find that you actually have things in common that have nothing to do with practicing law, but absolutely we'll start building a relationship. So that's why your perspective going in is so important. It's not just, I want a yes, I want to find an internship or an externship. It's, I want to make a connection with somebody and I will make the ask, but I will also work on building a relationship because, as you just said, the answer may be not right now, but yeah, how about the fall? How about the spring? That's perfect. That's perfect. So keep an open mind. It's hard. It's hard sometimes, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The one thing is the more you practice. I will say this is that the one overarching thing that I think students need to know that affects their confidence, that affects their fear, and affects their ability to engage in all of these different kinds of outreach, networking, putting themselves out there in school or professionally is it's almost never personal. If you reach out and the conversation doesn't go the way that you wanted, it's not because of you. If you reach out and you get turned down, it's not because of you. If you ask your mentor for help and they say, sorry, I'm busy this month with a trial, it's not because of you. Just keep going and keep asking because it's always not because of you. It's just timing.
I am so glad you said that because that's exactly right. It's business. It's not personal. And that is a hard lesson for many of us to learn. I got my feelings hurt a lot way back when, until I finally did understand this isn't a personal thing. These people barely know you. This is not personal at all. Or they know you and they like you because, we go out to lunch regularly. It's business. That's it. It's business. So the sooner you can learn that lesson, the better off you're going to be in terms of your happiness level in your work as a lawyer. Yeah, that's great. I was going to ask you, what's the one lesson you think everybody needs to learn? I think you hit the nail right on the head with that one.
I think that's a big one because it goes back to everything else. But honestly, the number one thing is be intentional and reflect on your experiences. If you don't take time to think about what you learned and what came out of an experience, any kind of experience, then you are doomed to continue to repeat those things again and again. Mm-hmm. Life is something that's going to happen to you versus life being something that you are a creative partner in living. And so be intentional, be reflective, always have a plan for what you want to get out of an experience, and then really do the work to think about whether you got that. And if not, why not? Or if you did, why? And how are you going to replicate this into the next thing?
Exactly. That's great. Great advice. Great advice. And taking the time is something that lawyers in particular frequently don't do. We're rushing from this project to the next one to the next one. But taking the time, absolutely, it pays great dividends. So Allison, this has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I think your students are very lucky to have you to work with, and you are doing the work that they need. So I thank you very much and appreciate you coming in, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome. Now, for our listeners, next week, next Tuesday, we are speaking of networking, Allison. We are actually having Maylee Colmer come, and she is going to talk about networking like a pro. So she's going to give more tips, just like you did today. I hope everybody is listening. I know you got great tips from Allison, and come back on Tuesday. We'll talk all about networking. Have a great day.